Welcome to today's Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle. We are taking up the topic today from the Still and Moving Center Almanac, what is the body to us? And to give us a presentation that will kick off our conversation, Robert Moore will be taking a phrase from Walt Whitman, The Body Electric, and speak to it from the classical scientific tradition. To introduce Robert Moore, here is Kirk Gradine. Kirk?
I can tell you a little bit about him. I just also recently introduced him.
Hopefully you won't say too much.
No, not too much. But Robert he studied philosophy, has always been interested in philosophy, but received a BA from UCSB. And then because he was also interested in service and the care of others, he went on to become a registered nurse. And that was his career. And for the last, 10 or 15 years of his career, he was at the Santa Barbara Rehabilitation Institute and specialized in patients with severe brain injury. So he's, I would say, just from that basis, eminently qualified to tell us something about the human body and what it means to us. But I also know that throughout his adult life, that Robert has had a deep interest in philosophy, both ancient and modern, and has given many talks on many occasions that I've heard, very deep, what I would call, esoteric aspects of philosophy and of practice, and always with an eye to how the ideas can be implemented and integrated into one's life. So I'm sure we're in for a real treat today. Robert Moore.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to, since this is Still and Moving Center, I suspect that you know a lot about the physical body in ways that I don't. But I want to mention one thing that was interesting in my experience in the treatment of brain injury. In the 1980s, actually the treatment of brain injury was new, and they were still learning on the best ways to treat people. And so initially we were doing what you would call cognitive training, right? Trying to get people to pay attention, orient them to physical reality, orient them to their own identity, those kind of things. And there wasn't a lot of focus on the physical. But over time, it was learned that people recovered a lot faster if they did physical activities. Initially that might be just walking, and then various kinds of training and exercises, and then performing physical tasks. And I mention this because it just shows you how much our so-called brain is, which was what was injured, is connected with the whole organism. And one of the quotes in this almanac is that the human body is not a thing or substance, but a continuous creation. And that, I wanted to start out because, I was actually kind of lost about what I wanted to do. Because Renee and I first talked about ancient Greece. And I thought that there were certain concepts in ancient Greece that were relevant, that were important, especially in terms of the Still and Moving Center that you may have taken up before, but it's like certain things are good to contemplate over and over again. And we got into this conversation because last week for the Institute of World Culture, we did a presentation on Plato's allegory of the cave. And he compares our bodily life, our physical life of sensation, to being chained in a cave, being confined in a cave and seeing only shadows of images on the wall. That's the way he characterizes our physical existence. And we talked about how one of the ancient conceptions of the body is that it's a tomb. And actually the Gnostic resurrection would be the Christos being liberated from the body. That would be the resurrection. You know, if you've had a spinal cord injury and you're paralyzed from the neck down, the body sure seems like a tomb. And if you have serious illness or you're dying of cancer, you're in continuous pain, you know, the body can, you would really like to not be in the body, let's put it that way. But then there's the other conception, which is really Pythagorean, comes from Egypt, and then we find it in various places in Western history, that man is the microcosm of the macrocosm. And that's seen physically, you know, in Leonardo's Vitruvian Man, where he shows that all the proportions of the body are divine ratios, that the body has, just in its physical proportions, has the divine aspect to it. And Plato, in his laws, says that the body is like the human body is like a puppet made by the gods. That's a curious statement, huh? But then I think about Leonardo and all his study of the muscles and, you know, how we move. But, you know, it's like the way that we move mechanically is the muscles, but it's the nerves that pull the strings, right? If I have a thought, I want to say something, boom, you know, my mouth does all these complicated things to send out vibrations that somehow you understand, which, you know, is to me a continuous miracle. So there's this other aspect of the body. But in either conception, if you think about it, you'll realize that the ancients in numbers of schools saw the body as the tenement of the soul, right? It's a vehicle. It's something that's of use to the soul. And the soul enters the body and leaves. And in Pythagorean and Platonic tradition, that would be repeatedly in terms of reincarnation. But we don't need to go into that. It's just the fact that whether you consider the body a tomb or a temple, it's not the self. It's not the soul. The soul is something else that uses the body and manifests its capacities and intelligence through that vehicle. Now I wanted to read something from Plato's laws, which just because it may not be true, but it just reminded me of the Still and Moving Center. The instruction is, it is the life of peace that everyone should live as much and as well as he can. What then is the right way? We should live out our lives playing at certain pastimes, sacrificing, singing, dancing, so as to win heaven's favor and repel evil influences. Now, Renee, don't you think that reminds you of the Stellar Moving Center?
Absolutely.
So you got the stamp of Plato right there on you. Plato's laws. Yeah. So it is interesting that for Plato, for instance, in the Republic, that to have a strong and healthy body, he felt gave you courage and confidence and strength to function. So even though the body is a transitory vehicle, and he says anything that's in a continuous state of change is not ultimately real, but still its health and is very important. And the Dalai Lama even mentions that, you know, if you have an improper diet and you have indigestions, things like that, it's a real obstacle to meditation or being in contact with that which is not confined to the body. But in either all those cases, music is important in terms of mental and physical health. And music for them was not just the lyre, which of course, in some sense, analogically, the human body is Apollo's lyre. The cosmos plays upon us on the strings of our being with various tones. And those, the really healthy tones might be stories, hymns, literature. They consider that to be music too. And in fact, Greek at its best was almost sung when in talking. That's how much respect they had for the logos or speech. They had a tremendous amount of respect for it. And how does that connect to body electric? Who knows? Maybe I'll get there. But because it has to do with vibration. And bioelectricity has a lot to do with vibration. I wanted to just read something that Kurt, I think, has brought up before, from Pythagoras about the use of sound in music. And this is, he's talking about the Pythagorean disciples. For when they went to bed, they purified the reasoning power from the perturbations and noises to which it had been exposed during the day by certain odes and peculiar songs, and by this means procured for themselves tranquil sleep. And all the studies about the importance of sleep. And few and good dreams. But when they rose from bed, they again liberated themselves from torpor and heaviness of sleep by songs of another kind. It's just such a sweet kind of idea that our psychophysical organism responds to these musical sounds. Now, when we come to tracing back Western medicine and treating the body, normally go back in the West to Hippocrates, because he separated the idea that illness was a result of the gods punishing you, that it actually had physical causes. And it was either like lifestyle, diet. What was the other thing? Oh, just the environment, habits of living. And they had actually a pretty simple way. They would observe a person, take a history, the kind of things that you do in contemporary medicine today. But they had very simple treatments. They figured the body would heal itself if given a chance. So they would have it rest, good diet, and plus he has an interesting idea. He says, to eat when sick is to feed your illness. Interesting idea there. Of course, he also said at the same time, food is your best medicine. But even though he, went to the material elements for bodily health, his Hippocratic oath, I was surprised to learn, starts out with these words: I swear by Apollo, healer, by Asclepius, the son of Apollo who is a healer, by Panacea, the universal remedy, by all the gods and goddesses, making them my witnesses. So the gods were not separate from the discipline. Now, I just have a few things, like the simplest thing when you're talking about the body electric is just the nerve impulse. So like if you sever a nerve, like in your spinal cord, the big nerve groups, then things are paralyzed and the sensation stops if it's, depending on what kind of nerve or how big the damage is. So, no impulses flow. And our brain is constantly involved in nerve impulses. And it's just interesting that, well, what we call nerves, by the way, are made up of neurons, and you probably know, but it's interesting to think that a nerve is like a plant or a tree. You've got a nerve cell body that has dendrites that are like roots. And then you have a trunk, that's the axon, which is the big long thing that connects with other parts. And then at the end, it branches out and connects with other nerves or organs or whatever. And the nerve impulses travels, the dendrites or the roots receive the impulse, and then it's sent along the axon, the trunk, and then feeds out through the branches and connects through synapses. And we don't need to go into all the details. The reason I didn't do a PowerPoint, I just want to give you the impression, the details are not important about this kind of thing. Every nerve normally has a negative potential on the inside of the membrane and a positive potential on the outside. And if you ever had your blood done, you can get a sodium chloride level. Well, sodium is much more concentrated outside the nerve fiber, and potassium more on the inside. And potassium is negative, sodium is positive. And this creates a resting potential of minus 70 millivolts, like inside the cell membrane. And that potential is critical to maintain because it means that that nerve then is responsive to an impulse to being triggered. And in fact, there's what they call the sodium-potassium pump, which requires energy to keep that right balance where they pump sodium in and out and potassium in and out of the cell to maintain that minus 70 millivolts. So that's the body. Every cell, how we have billions of nerves, but every nerve fiber has that going on all the time. See, this is just simple, right? It's nothing, you just read it in physiology. But to me, it's totally amazing that the body, every nerve fiber maintains that potential. And when you have an actual transmission of an impulse, you get a reverse polarity. So you have these ion gates so that sodium positive flows in to the cell, and so the polarity changes. So then it becomes negative on the outside, positive on the inside. And then it just goes along in a big wave like that, all along the nerve. And as it goes along, and then the pump, and as well as some other ion gates, it's actually more complicated than I'm making it, takes place. Plus, to make it really fast, they have a myelin sheath that makes it, instead of just going straight like that, it jumps like that to make a very fast impulse. So your thoughts, your feelings, your ability to move right now, those are all nerve impulses. That's all those little impulses being triggered throughout your body. Now, I just find that miraculous because how does that, people want to say, well, you got the frontal lobe, you got the parietal lobe, temporal lobe, they all do various things. And then parts of them do various things. That's true. But the content, the qualitative aspect of those firings of impulses, they are quite different, right? Our consciousness, in other words, what we call being conscious of a brain, and a brain has to be functioning to be conscious on the physical plane, is just those nerve impulses. And it's interesting that 20 to 40% of the brain, of the energy the brain uses is involved in maintaining that resting potential so that they'll all be ready, able to fire when the time comes. So that's one aspect of all these matrices. And then I just wanted to mention one other that I think you're familiar with. We have this, we breathe in the air, oxygen, we exhale carbon dioxide. Then what happens? Well, that oxygen goes into the cells, and that's where an oxidation, that's where we have the inner fire. We have oxidation reduction reactions that take place, as you probably know, in the mitochondria. And depending on how much the cell, like for instance, it's interesting that red blood cells don't have any mitochondria, but they have to carry oxygen. So it seems like that would be an obstacle, because in the mitochondria, the oxygen is used to oxidize, glucose is broken into two molecules and goes through what's called the citric acid cycle, the big circle. And it's often called the electron transport through that cycle. And that produces all the energy, all the ATP, all the bonds that are broken to produce all the energy that we use throughout the body in that cycle in the mitochondria. Sometimes they think that the mitochondria may have been a bacteria because the genome is similar to bacteria. But so you have this cycle of electron transport that where bonds are broken and formed, where our carbohydrates and oxygen, we end up with ATP and of course carbon dioxide that has to be expelled. But this again is like the speed at which this takes place is microseconds, right? It's like phenomenally fast. And one of the things it produces, especially in adipose tissue, is warmth, or the heat of our body, that we're still alive. When that stops, right, at death, the body gets cold. So you have this, and then the other thing is to think about electrons are not things. They're like all subatomic particles are waves. They're vibrations. And that's where the music and Apollo's lyre comes in, is that at this level, you're talking about, at the subatomic level, you're just talking about waves and vibrations and interactions between those vibrations. So there is a way, that it may have given you a hint that the whole body is like music, that the health of the body is actually a harmony. And so I'll end with a poem by a member of the Institute of World Culture, Ibrahim Ibn Salma. It's about the cell, C-E-L-L. I really like this poem. So he's talking about cells in our body. In singles or groups, we always existed. You made us so that we make you. 50 trillions of us live inside you in communion. We survive because we love one another. The strong empower the weak. All is powerful. The healthy heal the sick. All is healthy. Yet we are commanded by your thoughts, feelings, emotions. So send us love, send us kindness, send us compassion. We send you life. Isn't that cool?
That's super wonderful. I think we all want to be sent that, Robert.
It's a beautiful poem. But it's so much Abraham. He's so much like that.
Yeah, I really think that you should send that to information at Still and Moving Center, and then we'll be able to send it out to all the participants. That is a poem. Thank you, Robert. David.
I was just going to ask the reference for that, again, where that came from.
Well, it's from I don't know if you could even get it. Oh, it's a book of poems called Who Created the Universe and Why?
Okay.
Who Created the Universe and Why? By Ibrahim Ibn Salma, Salma. But he self-publishes. But I will send you all that because it's worth having. So I'm interested in your ideas and comments because I feel like you have so much more experience in this area than I do.
Well, Robert, if I could start off, because I was particularly fascinated by what you said towards the end there about the electrons of the cells that compose the atoms and molecules of the body, that they are not things, they're not particles, and you called them waves. And I just recently heard a really excellent and very accessible lecture by a fellow named David Tong. He's a quantum field physicist at Cambridge, top guy. It's on YouTube, and but he goes through this fairly detailed but simplified explanation of the history of how they arrived at the idea of a quantum field, and that they have to cut it short, he says that it's no longer appropriate to speak of an electron either as a particle or a wave, but a probabilistic disturbance in a all-pervading field. And he says that these fields, these quantum fields, they penetrate all of space. They're everywhere. They penetrate objects of all kinds. They extend out into the cosmos, right? And that there's 4 of them that compose everything, the whole of our experience in terms of quantum field theory can be explained in terms of these 4 fields, and the fluctuations that are occurring within them are the electrons, which then compose the atoms, and which then compose molecules and eventually cells and so on. And so it's just it's a completely different kind of mind-blowing way to think about matter, as we know it, right? And this is he also says that the conception of matter that is now been developed through quantum mechanics and quantum field theory is that even the top physicists haven't really absorbed it, what it really means. And that's why you get these different expressions of it, because they're not really sure how to communicate it. Very few understand it, and anyone who claims that they do, they don't really understand it, right? Because it's so radically different than our previous conception. So anyway, the point is, I love this idea because it completely blows away our idea about the body as being something separate that belongs to us, right? And also we also have this idea that I know you're familiar with in medical science, that we're continually exchanging the cells. You said there were 50 trillion, but they're not like they stay with us forever, right? They're continually being produced by the body, and we're continually exchanging them with our environment. And apparently every 7 years, there's a complete renewal of all the cells in the body. And we recently read that certain organs, they know the exchange is much quicker than that. It's like over a 2-year period, completely new cell regeneration. So it's like, it's instead of like solidifying our concept of what the body is, it becomes this very fluid, interactive, vibrational field that we're constantly in interaction with our environment. And then this whole idea that you brought up of this vibratory music, that it's really that key that maintains the harmony of it. You put those ideas together and just get a very different conception. Maybe you can talk about that a little.
Whoa. Well, I have some familiarity with that theory, but in terms of that field and string theory, where they have all these characteristics or qualities of matter to explain what happens before you get things that we could understand. From what I've heard of in terms of people that talk about string theory, they're still talking about, they still go back to Pythagoras, that it's actually like music in some kind of abstract sense, that everything actually flows from these fundamental harmonies. And that's what really makes up, that finally gives expression to what we call matter. That's all I could say. But in terms, the other thing is, we do tend to feel, when we focus purely on the body, we feel like we are kind of separated, which is kind of odd because we're constantly breathing the air. We constantly have to shovel food in to keep it going. We're constantly interacting with the environment in terms of our heat, heat and cold, constant exchanges. And that's just at a superficial level, not counting the other kind of emanations that go from us. So we, even on the very gross physical level, we're constantly interacting with our environment.
I was reading in the chat that someone was asking for the name of your talk. So Robert Moore's talk today has been on the body electric, which is a takeoff, I believe, from Walt Whitman's poem, I Sing the Body Electric. And so with his vast experience in the medical field and the underlying studies behind it, he's able to obviously bring us a wealth of information and understanding on this very living and dynamic field in which we live, that gives us so much more of a sense of the body as this very living temple and also a very moving kind of vehicle.
Yeah, it is, if you've had people who have had a stroke, but when you spend your whole career watching people with nerve injuries from various problems, like, people that have multiple sclerosis, that's a degeneration of the myelin sheath in the brain and spinal cord that allows very quick impulses. And you see what happens just on that level. And when you get nerve damage and paralysis and inabilities to think, you see that the flow of bioelectricity is critical to what we call life, what we call our life. And
also, Robert, you were asked for the name of the gentleman, I believe you said a Tong on the quantum field.
That's Kirk. He's the one that mentioned him. David Tong, he put it in.
Yeah, I just put it in chat. It's David Tong. If you Google his name and the quantum field theory, you'll get that lecture. It's very prominent right now on YouTube. And there's also a much shorter one. It's kind of humorous because he talks about what he calls the one of the white lies of current science, and that is the idea that an electron is either a particle or a wave. So this is one of the little white lies, and that they tell you in high school, and they still talk about it in college. But once you get to graduate school, you find out, no, it's not really either one of those.
But that was a theory at one time, though. You know.
Oh yes.
They keep changing.
Right. Right. Oh yeah. More than and he talks about that that transition, that science has gone through. But apparently we've got some work to do to catch up.
Yeah, but it's at a certain level of observation. It is a wave. Like all subatomic particles at a certain level of observation are waves, just so you know that.
Yeah.
But that's not their ultimate reality.
Right, because it's a manner in which we observe it, right?
Right.
What it is actually when we're not observing it is something different than what it is that through our means of super microscopes, whatever, that we gain an observation of it. But what it really is beyond that.
Experientially, I'd like to ask, what is everyone's experience of the body as something other than a Hulk that we're living inside of? I know how I feel when I dance, and I get to a place where I am just feeling pure joy, and I come off the dance floor and I just want to hug every person I see and tell them how much I love them. And while I'm dancing, I also I just kind of get understandings when I'm moving in time with the music, and I'm cueing other people to move, and I'm getting images, and we could be, I don't know, I think we've traveled on light beams sometimes as we're dancing together. And I know that we have been lifted up by dragons and transported. So my imagination is also really stimulated as I'm dancing. So I feel as if I have some experiences of the body, especially the body in motion with music, as being a vehicle for experiencing enormous joy. I think that was my inspiration probably for starting Still and Moving Center.
Well, for me, it would be surfing. Go ahead, David.
I was thinking along the lines, I believe, where Renee was headed, just about the connection between. So I know when I'm feeling good and my health is at its best, I seem to think the clearest, greater focus, et cetera, et cetera. And then you think about Stephen Hawking, like that sort of blows away all the notion about physical health in the body being the vehicle for greater creativity or greater understanding. But in my experience, the two go hand in hand. It's even funny to think about that we call them, that I mentioned the word two, like they're separate, which I believe they're not. But I was also thinking about in this evolution of science and our understanding, it's fairly recent discovery that fascia is not just a sort of a packing material stuffed into our body to keep things from flaying apart, but fairly recent discovery that it transmits electrical signals, electrical impulses 7 times the speed of the nervous system. And that's all within the last few decades. as Robert mentioned, we think of the nerves as sort of the ones that pull the muscles and make the body move. But there's a whole nother network of information that travels at lightning speed through the body, having it do exactly what it does, completely outside of the nervous system. So physiology and anatomy are also advancing as we create the technology to look deeper within. There's a video, I think it's on YouTube, it's called Strolling Under the Skin. And it's a German technology that allowed us to finally see fascia in action and see how it can completely reshape and reform into different structures spontaneously as the body needs. And this is all pretty new stuff. So what we thought was incredibly complex, it only gets more complex the further in we look.
No kidding. That's exactly it. You're right. I mean, that's what gets me is the deeper you go, the more amazing it seems. There doesn't seem like there's anything mechanical about it at all. So we should hear from Diana and Sharon, at least something.
And Mary.
I find it very fascinating. You know, it's like how little we do know, you know, that we are body, mind, and spirit in one for me. You know, it's all connected. It's all the same. That quantum field is who we are. And it is through movement and allowing ourselves to feel what's going on in the body that we can actually feel the joy. And I loved your talk. I thought it was really interesting. And I feel that oneness when I meditate. I feel that joy. I feel that feeling of interconnectedness with all that is. And it's our body is just a vessel, but it's also connected to everything. And I think it's real important for me to, when I experience that, my body to remember that it's just not an enclosed system that is not connected to everything and influenced by everything.
Wow, thanks.
Okay, well, I feel like this is above my pay grade, and sometimes I haven't thought about these things, but every day is a new experience. I learn things every day. Music, I think, is what brings me to that tiny, tiny place where I can let everything go, and I just feel that that's where I get my strength and my joy, aside from my family and all those other things. But thank you very much, Robert. It was a good introduction to something I didn't know about. Amen.
I think for myself, I'm a kinetic learner, so any movement, my body loves it, and I enjoy it very much. Whether it's, that's how I met Renee, was doing her Nia class, and that was very free-forming yoga. I do a lot of yoga, Tai Chi, and Zumba. So anything movement, my body really reacts to it very well. But the other thing is, my second part of learning is audio. And so I feel that, and that's a lot of vibrations. And I think that when I hear people and when they share through sounds, I learn a lot better and understand better, and it excites me. I find that it excites me a lot more than if I have to read a deadpan paper. That doesn't at all. It's like flat. I love reading, but then I'm more excited by the sound that someone shares with me. And that vibrational sound really gets me more excited, I think, and want to look like seek for things like you shared with us, and so did Kirk about David Tong, and you shared the poem, is to find out more about it. But it's the vibrational, I think, of your speaking and sharing that really motivates me more.
Yeah, I agree. So Fariba, you're the last one.
Thank you, Robert, to make us think about something that we have been over and over told we are body, mind, the spirit, to say it's a part of the wave of the oneness. I think it's very, very heart opening to think about the body as also vibration, you know, and I really love the new way to look at. Also, I was most of the day editing a piece of interview, and the central idea of it was the verses of Masnavi, Rumi's masterpiece, that talks about this universe is the mountain and our actions are the echo. And I was just thinking it would be so wonderful to say, you know, the actions comes through the vehicle of the body. And the whole notation of the echo is the central idea of the vibrational fields that we are, and that nothing is segregated and by itself. Everything is vibrationally or at atomic level speaking to each other and has conversation. So that's interesting that you talked about your topic today, because that was most of the day I was editing pieces about these idea of being vibrational fields and the seeds that we put into the vibration and the web. And I think also I mentioned seeds we put in the womb, our spirit grows into these waves that goes from us to the rest of the world. And the idea was our intention should be supporting the oneness. And thinking about that holistically with what you say, it really changes my mind. And also what Kirk said about the time that Rumi was living in, which was very much to say mind, body, and the soul. So it's a really new way of thinking about it. Thank you to initiate that and make us think more. Both of you, thanks.
I'm wondering if there's any Hindu scholars that could recall the notion of the three gunas.
You mean
takers on that one?
Yeah, that's right. Because all matter, you're right, Prakriti, all matter for in Indian philosophy can be reduced to three qualities: sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva is light, harmony, truth, goodness, kindness. Rajas is activity, striving for results, energy. And tamas is stasis, ignorance, darkness, those kind of qualities. So I'm not quite sure how to put those together with.
What you made when you mentioned the notion of the four fields is what sparked my interest on that, because the idea of the three gunas and their interactions are what produce all life in the universe. And this notion of the four fields and it's their interactions. It may turn out to be, as many times before, the Indians had it, had the bones of the conversation already in place thousands of years ago.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That the fields are these qualities.
Robert, may I add my question on before you answer?
Well, that actually is a question for Kirk because he's the one that talked about the 4 fields.
Well, my question, and which I believe may be related, and it stems from the comments that Fariba was making, is that when we talk about these different aspects of the human being, and we talk about like the physical aspect, minimally the mental aspect, and then the soul or spiritual aspect, and then we can talk about other aspects as well, like maybe the emotional aspect of the human being, but then also like above the mental and before you get to the spiritual, maybe there's something between that, maybe some like deep, compassionate, deep feeling aspect. Anyway, do you think that if there are these different aspects of the human being, and we've been talking about vibrational levels, that each one is kind of moving in its own vibratory plane? So that maybe the physical aspect of the human being is working in a lower vibrational level, and the mental aspect is working at a different, slightly higher vibrational aspect. And then when you get to the soul level, maybe it's working at it even higher. And I'm just using these hand levels, but that's only symbolic. So anyway, do you think that the different aspects of the human being are actually constituted of varying vibrational levels? So when we interact on a physical level, with one another, we're interacting with one set of vibrations. When we're interacting on a mental level, we're interacting at a different vibrational level, etc.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about, right? I think you're right overall, but I just wanted to talk about one point, which is, why is it that we understand? Do we understand each other? I mean, how much when we speak to each other do we really understand? When we do understand, then I would say we're on the same frequency. That there is a corresponding vibration set up that, to me, would actually transcend the brain per se. That it would enter into a different level of consciousness. But there's no reason why one couldn't have various degrees of reality that are like the 3 classic stages, right? Or the waking state, the dreaming state, and the deep dreamless state. Of course, there's beyond that. But that these, as we know, even in contemporary science, continually affect each other. Our waking state affects our dream state affects our waking state. And going into deep sleep, dreamless sleep, is critical to our overall stability and health. So you can see that these various states, which can be associated with, various harmonic states, they do interact with each other. And that could be true in even more complicated ways. But that's why the idea of Apollo's lyre, is those strings are just a way of talking about that there are various levels of our consciousness that we can function on. And we can move into abstractions and concretions. And those are like traveling or plucking different strings.
If I could just add one last comment, because we're out of time, but that in terms of ancient Hindu philosophy, you do have this, concept in the oldest Vedas and Upanishads about the cosmos being like a great sun, composed of 7 planes, or 7 rays is the way it's spoken of. And you get that reiterated in the central hymn of all of Hinduism and of Hindu philosophy, which is the Gayatri. And it's that sun is expressed in terms of sound, right? The famous Om, or AUM. That is what, that's the primal vibration, it's said, that is continuous throughout the whole of manifestation. So you could say that's the primal field. And everything else is like all the other 7 layers are like condensations, almost like steam turning into water. But all vibrations at different levels. And that, I think, gives again, a much richer idea about what the human body is, right? Because it's really a descent into a more consolidated field that appears to be, differentiated, that, I'm here in California and you guys are in Hawaii. We're separate. But that's part of the illusion, right? That ultimately we're part of that one space, that one sound, which Mary might refer to as God, or Diana might say it's the Buddha nature, right? But I think it's fundamentally it's that same idea.
Thank you all.
So much appreciate that.
Thank you, Robert.
Robert, and
Thank you,
all
Robert.
of you for your contributions.
Thank you, Robert. Kurt, that was really helpful.
Yeah. And Kirk, thank you for stepping in at the last minute. All right. Thanks so much, y'all. Aloha.
Thank you all, beautiful friends.
Aloha.
Namaste.
Namaste.